Tonight, the promising new therapy targeting an aggressive and deadly brain cancer. Exclusive access into how the rare treatment reaches a tumor's precise location.
I have 2 grandkids. One is 10 months old, and I can be around them.
How much more time it can give patients, and how a Canadian-designed prototype could improve access. The tactic teachers are leaning on to limit the influence of artificial intelligence in the classroom. And remembering reggae legend Jimmy Cliff. How a Jamaican cultural icon is being celebrated for globalizing his country's signature sound.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening. New hope tonight for Canadians suffering from one of the most aggressive cancers, glioblastoma. And while patients still don't have a cure, they may potentially have something they rarely get: more time. CTV's Avis Favreau on the breakthrough and the barriers in this exclusive report.
On the stretcher is 67-year-old Elena Marcoux, about to be treated for an aggressive brain tumor in a very new way.
We confirmed that this is a glioblastoma.
She's one of about 1,000 Canadians diagnosed each year with glioblastoma, a cancer with a very high death rate. It ended the life of musician Gord Downie. The key problem: chemotherapy can't get past the blood-brain barrier to stop the tumor cells. So as part of her treatment, doctors give Elena an infusion of tiny micro bubbles. And as she lays in an MRI, they send ultrasound waves into her brain to cause those bubbles to vibrate. The result: the bubbles are able to briefly pry open the brain's protective barrier, allowing the anti-cancer drug to reach the tumor.
As I went through, it got easier.
A new study of 34 patients, almost half of them in Canada, found this treatment given once a month for just 6 months extended overall survival from 19 to 30 months, a 40% increase. All the more intriguing because a few patients have survived longer.
There are still patients who were on this trial that are still alive right now, and that's 4 to 5 years in.
While not a cure, Dr. Lipsman is hopeful.
This is a disease that is in urgent need of treatment. I think the safety data was pretty compelling. I think the efficacy data was pretty compelling. And I'd love to see this as quickly as possible move through the regulatory process.
The treatment is clearly promising, but it needs big hospital-based equipment like this MRI, meaning it will be hard to get out to patients across the country. And that's why Canadian scientists here are developing the next generation of portable focused ultrasound.
And this is what the next Canadian-designed prototype looks like: wires that deliver the ultrasound outside of an MRI, with patient studies to begin next year.
We can do it faster, we can do it more streamlined, doesn't require an overnight stay, but all of those steps will mean a much reduced cost footprint.
Elena, meanwhile, has one more treatment to go.
I have 2 grandkids. One is 10 months old, and I can be around them.
After which she hopes her brain tumor remains stable as she helps science with the next stage of this research. Avis Favreau, CTV News, Toronto.
In other news, a stunning setback for U.S. President Donald Trump tonight. A federal judge threw out 2 criminal cases against 2 public figures the president targeted for prosecution. CTV's Washington Bureau Chief Joy Malbin on the rebuke and the new investigation launched by the Pentagon.
He was the president's FBI director. James Comey also led the investigation into alleged ties between Trump's 2016 campaign and Russia. And that put him on the top of Donald Trump's political enemies list, charged with lying to Congress and obstruction.
I'm grateful that the court ended the case against me, which was a prosecution based on malevolence and incompetence.
The case tossed on a technicality. Judge Cameron Curry ruled Lindsay Halligan, the president's handpicked lawyer who had no prosecution experience, was appointed unlawfully and had no lawful authority to present the indictment. The judge also dismissed the fraud case against New York Attorney General Letitia James, who called Trump's charges political vengeance.
A justice system which has been used as a tool of revenge.
Trump lashed out against James after she successfully sued him for business fraud in 2022 for millions of dollars. Last fall, Trump complained in a social media post that nothing is being done about his political enemies, naming Comey and James among others. Next on the hit list, former astronaut and Senator Mark Carney, now being investigated by the Pentagon for appearing in this video.
You can refuse illegal orders,
reminding soldiers under the Constitution they can refuse unlawful orders. The lawmakers say soldiers have voiced concern about the president's strikes on alleged drug boats in South America. Kelly, a former naval officer, though, could face a military court-martial.
You can't have a functioning military if there is disorder and chaos within the ranks, and that's what these Democrat members were encouraging.
As for Comey, he knows Trump won't give up and will try to target him again. Tonight, the White House says they will appeal the dismissals to a higher court. Omar?
All right, join Melbourne in Washington, where Mark Carney is set to be considering a trip next week, according to a Canadian federal government source. The revelation coming less than 48 hours after the Prime Minister said this when he was asked about when he last spoke with Donald Trump.
Who cares? I mean, it's a detail. It's a detail. I spoke to him. I'll speak to him again when it matters. So we're busy. He's got other things to do. And we'll re-engage when it's appropriate.
Carney speaking to reporters at the G20 summit in South Africa on Sunday. If Carney travels to D.C., it would be his third visit since his election in April. With tensions between Canada and the U.S. still high, many snowbirds say they're not planning to head stateside this winter. CTV's John Venevali-Rao on the fractured state of relations and what American politicians who were in Halifax this weekend had to say about it.
At Toronto's Pearson Airport, this is typically a busy week for U.S. travel, with American Thanksgiving on Thursday. But this year, the lines may not be as long as usual.
I try my best not to go to the States right now. The whole country's in a conflict.
I am not going to the U.S. at all.
Many travelers continuing to boycott travel stateside since relations with our neighbors remain strained. Something brought up by several American senators from border states over the weekend as they attended an international security conference in Halifax. Some calling Trump's tariffs a mistake, noting not only the economic damage, but how Canadians are responding personally.
But the deeper problem is the cultural break. The idea that Canadians now don't think of Americans as their friends and their neighbors, but as an adversary.
We're your friends, and we're going to do everything we can to put things back to the wonderful relationship that we've always had with Canada.
The troubled state of that relationship reflected in the latest travel data, showing in October return trips by car from the U.S. were down 30% compared to a year ago, and by air they fell 24%. We caught up with Brian Ireland as he headed off on a holiday to Cuba. He says this year he didn't even consider going to Florida.
Not at all. Not at all. We just try to stay clear there right now. We're not involved in the politics, and we're happy to be a Canadian.
A recent poll found 70% said they'd feel uncomfortable traveling to the U.S. this winter. 65% said they were concerned about new border requirements for long-term visitors, including fingerprinting.
Still, some of those U.S. senators remain optimistic the damage to relations can eventually be repaired, with one of them, an independent, simply calling the tariffs ridiculous. John Venevali-Rao, CTV News, Toronto.
And some promising news for Canada's auto sector. Stellantis says it is bringing back a third shift at a Windsor, Ontario assembly plant in February, a move that will bring with it 1,400 jobs. The shift was eliminated 5 years ago. Workers recently laid off from the Stellantis plant in Brampton, Ontario, when it moved production to Illinois, will get first crack at the jobs. An outburst inside the Ontario legislature broke out over a controversial housing bill that passed. Angry screams from the gallery above directed down at politicians as they voted on Bill 60.
You're putting people on the streets!
Premier Doug Ford yelled at that protester, to get a job. Renters are worried the new changes favor landlords by accelerating evictions and taking away the ability for tenants to defend themselves. The legislature became so chaotic, security ordered the public out. BC Premier David Eby speaking out over reported plans for a potential energy deal between Alberta and Ottawa that could see an oil pipeline built through his province. CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver on the political push and the pushback.
Another handshake between Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected this week. And with that comes the conclusion of talks about a deal that sources say will set the framework for an oil pipeline from Alberta to the BC coast.
That is a work in process right now. I think we are getting close to a place, and when that gets done, we'll have some more clarity.
And that clarity should come soon. Sources say the signed memorandum of understanding is expected to push the pipeline project forward, which necessitates some kind of carve-out from the tanker ban. It's also likely to scrap the planned federal emissions cap, bolster carbon capture, and change the industrial carbon tax. Many environmental groups say the costs aren't worth it.
Alberta wants a pipeline that's going to carry 1 million barrels per day. So that would mean considerable expansion of the oil sands. So that's a huge climate issue.
Ottawa has said it wants BC's backing, but that province is unlikely to give it. Premier David Eby told Carney today it was unacceptable that BC has been excluded from the talks and that any agreement with Alberta requires First Nations approval and needs to limit the use of taxpayers' dollars in the construction of any prospective pipeline.
I explained all of those things. I asked that the Prime Minister incorporate those pieces into the agreement. He listened carefully, made no commitments on it. But I said at a minimum, coastal First Nations and British Columbia need to be at the table in these conversations about our province.
Alberta plans to leverage private sector capital and the Major Projects Office to try and get this pipeline built. Today, the Energy Minister told a committee that Ottawa will work with any proponent who has the support of First Nations, Omar, and the local jurisdiction.
All right, Annie, thank you. A chaotic commute for drivers in Calgary this morning as the city was slammed with a powerful blast of snow. It resulted in nearly 400 crashes and hundreds of delays and cancellations at Calgary's airport.
We're gonna wait in the airport as long as we can. We don't really have anywhere else to go.
And CTV Atlantic meteorologist Kaylin Mitchell takes a look at the cross-Canada forecast. Kaylin, tell us what we can expect.
Thank you, Omar. It's something that's probably not on a lot of people's holiday gift wish list, but it does look like some bitterly cold air will break down through parts of the country towards the end of this week. This is related to the polar vortex. It already looks a little bit distorted. Once it becomes distorted, that's when it has the higher potential of breaking down towards the south. So by the end of this week, the upcoming weekend, it looks like parts of Nunavut, northern areas of Manitoba, northern Ontario, and northern Quebec are going to be getting into some of this bitterly cold air. Some communities with low temperatures into the minus 20s and daytime high temperatures remaining minus 10 or colder. The other thing this can sometimes do is trigger or increase the potential for some early season heavy snowfalls. And interestingly enough, this very cold air is following up in behind a very heavy snow that'll make its way through parts of northern Ontario through the middle part of this week. Wednesday, Thursday time frame, north of Lake Superior. Already some winter storm watches issued by Environment Canada. Omar.
All right, Kellen, thank you. Conservation officials in BC have captured 2 bears, but so far there's no link to last week's grizzly bear attack on a group of elementary school students, sending several to hospital.
So at this time, it's preliminary. We don't want to jump to conclusions, but some of the evidence collected from this individual bear this morning didn't have the linkage that made us confident that it was the correct bear.
The search around Bella Coola has been going on for days. The first bear captured this morning will be fitted with a GPS collar and relocated. We are learning more tonight about a devastating fire that tore through a home last week west of Toronto. A family now torn apart with several members dead, including a newborn. Here's CTV's Heather Wright.
An excavator tears down the walls of this Brampton home days after a fire tore through, leaving 4 people injured and 5 people dead, including a toddler and a newborn who died in hospital.
I can confirm that 4 people lost their lives on scene here, and it's 3 adult females and a young toddler. Sadly, one of the patients at hospital of the 4 was pregnant. She underwent emergency surgery, delivered that baby, and that baby has since passed.
The baby's father writing on a GoFundMe page. We lost my unborn baby after my wife, Arshvir, who was pregnant, survived by jumping out a window but suffered severe injuries.
You can see the flames of this fire were so intense. There's damage on the house next door to the roof, the windows, and the side of this home. Heavy machinery was brought in to help with the investigation, but because the damage was so extensive, the house that caught fire, as well as the semi-detached home next door, both had to be demolished.
11 people lived in this home, which Brampton's Mayor Patrick Brown said last week was owned by an absentee landlord with a history of compliance issues. It's not clear if those allegations will be part of the ongoing investigation, but today police said the fire is not considered suspicious.
At this point, I can confirm that there has been nothing overtly to indicate any type of criminality here.
Neighbors still in shock over what they witnessed.
It's heartbreaking, right? Because I woke up with the fire, with the police sirens. Woke me up.
The Ontario Fire Marshal says smoke alarms were found at this home, but at this point, it's not clear if they were working. It's something that will be part of this investigation. Heather Wright, CTV News, Brampton, Ontario.
A community on Montreal's South Shore has been left shaken by the shocking death of two young men, brothers, hit by a light rail train. CTV's Geneviève Beauchemin takes us through how the tragedy unfolded.
A makeshift memorial at a light rail train station tells of the grief and shock at the loss of two young men, two brothers from a small town on Montreal's South Shore. This is a tragedy, and I hope it can serve to raise awareness among our young people, she says. There are warnings and fencing, but at 3 on Saturday morning, the two victims and a friend tried to cross a highway and the tracks. They were hit by an empty train. A 19-year-old was declared dead at the scene. The 22-year-old died in hospital. A third man was critically injured. The REM, as it's called here, was not in service at that time, but the fully automated system runs tests and maintenance overnight. Today, the operator, Pulsar, issued a warning saying, "We remind everyone of the importance of respecting safety zones and never accessing the tracks for your safety," and adding, "This is why the entire REM property is fenced off." The Transportation Safety Board has recorded 46 trespassing fatalities across Canada so far this year. But that doesn't include most LRTs, including the REM, which are not federally regulated. The Saint-Rémy Hockey Association paid tribute to the victims. Both were hockey players. This is Simon Brochu's sweater. His teammates gathered at Center Ice over the weekend in his memory. He was out with his big brother Samuel, celebrating his 22nd birthday when they were both killed. Friends have described the two young men as hardworking, but also as very close. The Quebec Police Force is still investigating to determine exactly what happened. Geneviève Beauchemin, CTV News, Brassard, Quebec.
Coming up.
It's like AI and homework is not necessarily a good combination.
Why the rise of AI has led to less homework for some students. A school division in Manitoba has come up with a thought-provoking idea on how to keep kids from using AI for their homework. The plan to get teachers to assign less of it. CTV's Alex Karpa explains.
A consistent classroom trend has emerged among students over the last few years.
We noticed that the students were having problems with homeworks.
Alain Laberge believes AI and other online tools have played a role in this shift. The school division he works for recently issued new guidelines for teachers recommending that homework be assigned in moderation while encouraging students to read on their downtime at night.
We have not forbid homework. What we're telling them is the easiest thing and one of the best thing is to read.
Laberge believes AI is impacting how students complete their homework.
They would just simply turn around and ask AI questions and just write down the answers, which we believe is not really useful. It's not critical thinking.
Teachers are being asked to be careful of the types of homework they give out to ensure AI isn't being used as a copying tool. Michael Holden believes it makes sense not to be grading work that is being sent home with students.
When I send homework home, I don't know if the student did that on their own or if they had help from a parent or from a sibling or a tutor, or plugging it into Google or plugging it into a chatbot and asking it to answer the questions for them.
Other professors like David Gerhard say finding a balance is important.
Finding some way to allow students to learn the power of these tools, but also learn how to do the material themselves is going to be the balance.
We're not trying to demonize AI. That's not what we want parents to understand. It's just like AI and homework is not necessarily a good combination.
For LaBerge, he says he just wants to see students succeed and is confident this policy will keep them on the right path. Alex Carpa, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Still ahead. A surprising revelation, what forced Childish Gambino to put a sudden stop on a global tour. Celebrated American-born Canadian author Thomas King, who spent a career telling Indigenous stories, says he has learned that he is not Indigenous. In an essay for the Globe and Mail, King says his mother told him his father was part Cherokee when he was just 3 years old. The now 82-year-old has since found out he has no Cherokee heritage. King says he did not purposefully pretend to have Indigenous roots. Singer and actor Donald Glover, also known by his stage name Childish Gambino, has revealed what prompted him to cancel his tour last year.
So when we went to Houston, I went to the hospital and the doctor was like, "You had a stroke."
That stroke led doctors to discover a hole in his heart. Glover shared the details on stage at a music festival this weekend in Los Angeles, apologizing to fans for letting them down. He has been recovering after 2 surgeries in the past year. Still ahead.
I'm gonna get my share right now. What's my
The legacy of a music pioneer, how Jimmy Cliff helped bring reggae to the world. A legendary singer in the world of reggae music has died. Jimmy Cliff was a Grammy-winning reggae pioneer whose 6-decade career featured songs of joy and resilience.
Natalie, I was going to be famous one day.
He also starred in the 1972 hit movie The Harder They Come, which is considered Jamaica's most influential film and a turning point in the global rise of reggae music, which Cliff believed could be a force for change.
Music can highlight awareness, and from that awareness, people can take some kind of action to better the situation. I think that's the role music has played through the ages.
I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way.
Cliff returned to the charts in the 90s with his cover of I Can See Clearly Now, which was featured in the John Candy film Cool Runnings. His family says Cliff suffered a seizure followed by pneumonia. Jimmy Cliff was 81. Unmistakable voice. And that's a snapshot of this Monday. Heather Butts will be here with you tomorrow. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching and good night.